be ready for more changes. More changes are coming from AI, and more changes are coming from Google and all those different platforms. We are getting closer to a place where communication gap is big in SaaS, and we're going to feel more of that pain across different, platforms, enabling more regulations, more changes coming, and to be able to survive that, to be able to have an edge as an organization, as a marketing leader, to help your organization to have an edge with all these changes.
Welcome to the B2B Digital Marketer Podcast, a podcast helping you to end your struggle with digital marketing, helping you to pave a new and better path to target and capture your ideal customer. Each week, we teach you how insiders and experts debunk the dreary and become engines of innovation. Now, here's your host, Jim Rembach.
Okay, B2B DM gang, we're going to have a good discussion here and hopefully cut through some of the confusion and fear, quite frankly, that exists in regards to a lot of the changes that have currently been bestowed upon us in regards to, the email police, because everybody's getting caught up in it. It doesn't matter. And so you could say that some bad apples have ruined it for the bunch, but I think there's more to it than just that. And we're going to find out about that because we're going to talk to Avetis Ghazaryan. Avetis, welcome.
Thank you, Jim. Hi.
Now, before we get going and talking about Yahoo and Google and, effectiveness and, conversions and complaints and all that kind of stuff, if you could please share with the B2B DM gang a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. So, I spent over a decade working with B2B technology companies, primarily focusing with early stage startups, and had the privilege to lead marketing teams, business development teams, in some cases both, in some cases one or the other. And very quickly in my career realized that generating demand and supplying sales team with demand is one of the most important things for the marketing department in early stages of growth. The challenge, however, is brand awareness, product awareness, and just really being able to cut through the noise. And so you really need, as a marketing leader, to find an edge every single quarter in your message. And what really helped me get there was my ability to focus on the buyer, just getting closer, one step closer to the buyer. And over time, that allowed me to, again, work with 6-7 B2B technology companies and implement different strategies. And one that worked over the past 5 years that I've been very excited about and been writing and talking about is momentum marketing. Essentially, just really finding high congregation moments and building your marketing strategies around those. And so over time, it led us to document all this work and create Growth Hunter, which I founded 2 years ago. And Growth Hunter is just a number one resource for everything B2B marketing, but specifically momentum marketing. So right now we're a community of growth hunters, all looking for driving growth and demand for early stage startups, leveraging momentum marketing as a channel. That's about me.
So I think before we go into this, momentum. I think we all can kind of have a sense of what that particularly means. But how has, as you talked about your time and tenure working with these different organizations, has momentum in regards to the conceptual elements of it been very similar, or has that even shifted in what momentum really means?
What momentum really means, that's a great question. What momentum really means is it's identifying moments or events that are strategically important for your buyers at that given time and has a significant concentration of your buyers around that event. One of the good examples that I have from my experience, and this is early on when I noticed that, is our partners Facebook were launching a beta feature, and it was about Instagram automation. Very exciting opportunity. They were not really publicly announcing this, but they have been telling many strategic buyers that we were going after that this is going to come soon. And so that gave us an edge and opportunity to align our marketing strategy about this topic. Why? Because Instagram as a channel was strategically important channel for them, and majority, over 70% of our buyers were on those channels, and they heard of that upcoming event. So there was this momentum, there was this buildup around this event, and a high congregation of people talking about what are the new strategies, how we're going to implement DM automation on Instagram. And so this allowed me to align my marketing and business development strategies on top of this topic that was top of mind. And that really resonated with the audience. We did webinars, ebooks that we created, a lot of landing pages. What's exciting and different when you run this motion is you look as a marketer, you look at your numbers and you see 2 to 3 times higher demand coming across these channels. You see 3 times more people attending your webinar. You see 3 times more people downloading your content. Why? Because you were able to get one step closer to your buyer and really offer them valuable and relevant content that's top of mind for them. So that's really what momentums are, right? Those are the high congregation moments that are strategically important to your buyer.
Well,
and going back to
go ahead. Go ahead.
And going back to momentum marketing as a concept, what it is just a method of strategically identifying, capturing, and leveraging those moments on a quarterly basis to drive consistent growth.
So, I mean, for me, my interpretation is that I'm always, looking ahead in order to be able to proactively plan out your motion, like you're talking about, in probably, I would say almost 2 or 3 quarters out in front. Is that correct?
Yeah. In many ways, what are going to be the consistent events happening for your buyers. If you are in retail space, there are certain, shopping events happening. There's code phrase happening. So there's a lot of events that are coming up. So those you should always be leveraging. However, these are a bit more timely, Jim. So these are something that you have your ongoing marketing strategy, and you have, let's say, your webinar coming up in a month or 2 months that you have scheduled. So what really momentum marketing encourages you in this instance is to think about, okay, within this 2 months, is there a specific discussion, topic, or event happening that I can capture? And when I decide on the topic of my webinar, when I'm deciding on, the blog post specifically and how we're going to write those blog posts for this quarter, can I make them a bit more relevant? Can I align them a bit more with what is happening today in the space? Maybe there is an SEC regulation discussion happening in financial space, and that's really what's top of mind to your buyers. So you don't necessarily change your strategy, but you just bring it a bit closer and you narrow it down a bit more specifically on the topic that that is top of mind to your buyers.
And we're going to talk a little bit more about the top of mind element as well, because that has become a critical factor in some of the successes that you're seeing for you and your clients. But we talked about, and I introduced, the changes that have come down recently, and quite frankly, they're just going to continue to come in regards to, email deliverability, email, almost, acceptance, unsubscribe, all the kind of things that go into the success metrics associated with email. Because look, people will say all kinds of different things in regards to what is currently dead, right? However, email is a critical component, and it's never going to get to the point where we can have as much as an intimate, no matter how much we want, an intimate relationship where we can just be sending, messaging, directly to somebody's phone. We may be able to get by with that for a short term, but ultimately that space is really held for things that are really personal and close. Like my financial institution, yeah, you can send me that message. The person who's trying to actually sell me a pair of shoes, or quite frankly, an educational series, don't be texting me. It just does not work. So when we start thinking about the inbox, it has much more impactful relevance, and we should not discount it. So when we start talking about some of these changes that Yahoo and Google have implemented, what do you hear people talking about and worrying about? And how should they really be thinking about this?
Great question. Waves of emotions in the beginning. I think they announced this around October last year. And what I've been hearing about from people is, okay, so what do we do? Should we change our email strategy now? We are bulk senders. What's going to happen? So in the beginning, I think what really happened is there was just a lot of emotion going on and trying to understand what this means to companies. And I think it's worth mentioning that, in the early stages, it was a bit unclear, but then over time, Google and Yahoo made it a bit more clear with regarding this regulation. And it really came down to three areas, right? You need to, the email authentication is important, unsubscription buttons, making sure it's all over the place, it's one click away, and the spam rate. And I think spam rate was one of the most painful areas from people that I have been connecting with, because the requirement is to be below 0.1% and not above 0.3%, I believe. And so that was really painful because a lot of companies were saying, well, I think we're at 2%, or like we're above 2%. And so that was really one of the biggest concerns is, if we keep being above 0.3%, Google is going to block our emails. We're going to be unable to use email. And to go back to your point, email today, regardless if messaging is the future, AI, what's happening, email is a critical channel today for business. Like it's number one channel. So one of the biggest concerns was, how do I change my strategy and what should I do? And luckily, again, it is not so critical as it sounded a few months ago. It is, however, it brought up the challenge in the market, which is email is very noisy today, and B2B companies need to do a much better job figuring out how to improve their email marketing strategy, how to bring it closer to the buyer to avoid that spam rate.
Okay, so that, as they say, that's the $10 million question. So what are some of the things that you're seeing to help people think about this and reduce some of the emotion to really get some more effective planning, into the process?
Yes. I think one thing that I have been implementing with companies, and I will take the blame many times, especially when it comes to outbound email, right? And this regulation applies to inbound marketing emails that are sent out from Marketos, HubSpots, but also the outbound SDR emails. And the regulation applies to both. And one of the things that I take a blame on is sometimes we do general outreach. So sometimes you do general nurture. And the realization from the group was to cut it down, right? So you really want to cut it down. And this is regarding to bulk senders. So if you're an organization with very large number of SDRs, you don't want to be sending out more than 5,000 emails. If you are sending out more than 5,000 emails, you want to be a bit mindful. But I think the discussions are really right now about how do I bring it down, more segmentation, making my sequences, my content, my email marketing content more relevant to my buyers. And so the tiering approach, one to many, one to one approach, I think is a way to go. Really narrowing down within your TAM and identifying specific areas where you want to apply precise email marketing. And that segmentation could be per vertical, it could be per buyer type, but really avoiding large scale email outreach is what the recommendation is. And I just want to note again, you won't necessarily be blocked or by Google if you are sending it out today. I think those regulations are going to come soon. Today, if you send it to Gmail or a personal email, that's where this regulation really works very strictly. If you're sending to businesses that are using Google Workspace, that doesn't apply yet. However, I think we're getting closer to that also being the case. And so the recommendation and I think the consensus of the discussion with the group, and we have yet to see the outcomes of this and keep improving. These regulations are new, is more segmentation, more tiered approach, and most importantly, with every sequence, with every content you generate, try to really align with what is important for your buyer today, and try to make sure that that content is not about your company. Avoid pure company-oriented emails. This is what my company does. This is what we solve for. Talk about them. Be buyer-centric. The more buyer-centric you are, the higher is the likelihood of the person receiving that email on their end to appreciate what you have to say. And if it is not necessarily the right time, they're not going to spam you. They're not going to block you. And that is the most important thing. And this is where everyone agrees and aligns, because when your content is aligned and is top of mind, and it's not the right time, you will receive an email that says, this is one of the best email I've received. Not the right time, but let's follow up later. That's a win. right? And that's what we are getting with all these personalized emails and strategies that we apply is one-to-one, one-to-many, but really just segmented. And really every sequence is built on different moments, different events that we know are important, and challenging ourselves as solution providers to think, how can we, within the context of this event, be helpful to you as a buyer, as an executive, whatever industry you're on?
Well, and you and I chatted about this prior, to us hitting the record button is, all of that sounds, it's like, okay, great. Strategy, understand it, see why, want to reduce complaints, but the execution element, I started thinking about, oh my God, now I have to do, 14 different messages because I have all of these particular groups. How do I, from a standard operating procedure or from an operating procedure from an automation or business rules, I'm like, that's a freaking nightmare, man. I ain't got time for that. That's the thoughts that come through people's heads is like, okay, great. In theory, I can see the need for that and why it's working, but the practical application, I don't think so. What would you say to that?
SDRs specifically would freak out, right? Because this is so much additional work. If you are going to ask each of your SDRs to make sure that they do the research, they identify all those challenges, or like even marketing teams, it's a big ask. And that was our realization over the past year, talking to so many technology companies, marketing leaders, sales leaders, and introducing them the momentum component, like momentum marketing, and how you identify high congregation moments. The realization has been that it is a lot of work. How do I scale this operation? And the second realization is that they're not really equipped today with tools or processes that really give them access to that information. And so, yes, some companies and certain executives are really great at always staying ahead and reading articles that their buyers are reading, connecting with their buyers, conducting interviews on a quarterly basis, absolutely best practices. But additional things that I recommend and we have seen to be so valuable is just enable processes. So first of all, a few things that our community is doing, and we find it really helpful, is number one, within your marketing or business development organization, you want to enable a process where whether it's your SDR or your marketing leader, you're conducting at least a few 4 to 5 conversations on a quarterly basis, connecting with buyers. And aside from selling the solution, you're trying to understand what is important for my buyer, conducting a 15-minute interview with your buyer consistently. Enabling processes where your teams are checking all the articles, all the resources that are number one and top priority for your buyers, that your buyers are reading and following, and they are the trusted sources for your buyers, to be ahead of the game, understand and be in the mindset of your buyer. Dan Kennedy spoke about this. This is not a newly invented thing. It is, however, important to incorporate that today, now, because you need to be closer to your buyer. And, like I said, interviews, number one thing, because many interviews, connect with as many of your buyers as you can. Use those, read those resources. My personal favorites are Prowly, PR tools like Prowly or Feedly, where if you don't have the time to check out the content every day, you can sign up and you can actually tag certain keywords that are relevant to your buyers, to you, and they can show you a congregation of articles or discussions. That also helps. And so, and lastly, at trade shows, right? So many trade shows are coming up, and they announce the agenda way ahead of time. So usually trade shows do a very good job at understanding what's important to the buyers. They conduct those interviews, so they save you that time. So always be on the lookout of the agenda from upcoming trade shows, the large ones, and see what is it that trade shows are putting out there when inviting them as speakers. Trade shows like Shop Talk, NRF, right? All the big ones. And just so many within each industry, but just really use those different ways consistently, systematically, every quarter. Enable that into your team, whether marketing or business development, to be aligned with your buyer.
So to me, it's like needing to implement and having, consistent, repeatable frameworks that are research based. So that we're getting the information that's necessary to fuel whatever it is that we're going to do. And you're right. I mean, that's oftentimes where we don't spend the time and don't, put in the effort. And you were talking about top of mind, and you said it several times. Yes, you talked about Feedly. Yes, you talked about trade shows. Yes, you talked about, but when we talked about this a moment ago, you were actually giving a different aspect to top of mind that I don't think people, really pay attention to. And I'd really like you to dive into that.
Yes, absolutely. So I think a few examples, right? Just to relate, to help the audience relate to this. And I think this is working with some of the customers in the past and talking with the community. A few relevant ones are AI. So AI is a large topic. Now, if you talk about AI, you're not going to be differentiated. Everyone talks about AI. Every marketing email, every SDR email, first thing it says AI. But within AI, there are certain events that are happening. For example, one of the things that I observed over the past year within a few industries is executives and leaders within those industries, whether it's retail, whether it's finance, whether it's health tech, they go through different phases with this AI journey. In the beginning, when ChatGPT hit, it was, oh, ChatGPT, and everyone was looking for information just to be ahead. And so if your message was really aligned on, hey, we are this and this company, and we can help you get ahead of this, that would actually resonate pretty well with that audience. 2 months later, that was no longer the case. And so, yes, you still talk AI, but everyone heard about it from their own vendors. They read articles, and they now have their own perspective about AI. What's next? Well, if you did interviews and you talk to some of your customers, you would realize that in certain verticals, they now are thinking about security. Is this secure? Is this scalable? And so this is what I mean by top of mind, where, AI event is a general topic that could be circling, or security in healthcare. This is an ongoing discussion. However, certain months, certain quarters bring specific topics and events. I mean, we're talking about Google and Yahoo. So, for example, if the audience is B2B technology companies, head of marketing, this event in particular, Google and Yahoo regulations, is what's top of mind for that audience. Now, will that be in a month or 2 months from now? Depends how these regulations escalate, right? If it slows down, it's no longer a top of mind event. Now, there might be some additional things incorporated, but again, it is top of mind if it's concerning. In October, it was very concerning. So this is what I mean by top of mind, Jim, where you really want to go a few layers deeper and really understand where is your buyer today in their journey within that topic.
I mean, yeah, this is a very different approach. And I would dare to say we're going to get a lot of conflict. We always talk about the divide and the silos of sales and marketing. It very well be that this could actually, drive and separate them even further because of what we're talking about. You have one side on the sales side, and it's speed and it's conversions. And then you have, a very different, methodical research-based approach that's going to allow whatever you do on that sales side to be more effective. So it's like, okay, how do we balance these two?
Yeah. I think what creates alignment is common goals. I think there need to be common goals between the two teams, and there needs to be alignment between the two organizations that this is what we need. Jim, today it's a challenge, and I agree. I think if marketing conducts this and there is no common goal between the two teams, and there is no perception that this is what we need, that is going to be a challenge. However, I think where things are going with Google regulations, with everything moving forward, more sales teams, more BDR teams, and SDR teams are going to recognize that we need to get closer to our buyer and start looking for solutions. And when you look as a sales organization, when you look for solutions, especially when it comes to your buyer, who do you go to? You go to your marketing team. And so I think it's really marketing teams need to take the first step and bring their organization closer to their buyers and help sales teams see that as a common goal, see that as an advantage. And I'll tell you what, I think one of the things from our experience that I've seen with our buyers and our community is that when you create message and when you generate demand with a message that aligns with your buyer, those conversations usually take you further in a sales cycle compared to conversations that you have, with the general message. And I'll take it even further. What's really interesting is with early stage startups in particular, like I said earlier, awareness is an issue. And so, when I talk to buyers, what they tell me is very interesting. This is I just conduct this interview from time to time, and one of the leaders told me once that, hey, when we talk to early stage startups and they have this interesting idea, what we do is we start the evaluation process, and then when it comes down to making decisions, it really comes down to price. And we then go to our existing partner and see if they can offer a better price and offer that solution to that price. Because, they trust, there is trust created with the existing partner. Trust is the missing piece with this new early stage companies. And so going back to why this is necessary for sales teams is because if you can get closer to your buyer, if you take that extra step, and I think with AI, it's going to be easier, but if you take that extra step to align with your buyers and their priorities, it's going to help you close more deals. It's going to help you. You just have to see the full picture.
Well, I mean, what you're talking about, I've seen play out in the past couple of years, and that, ultimately though, you look at the sales and marketing activities, early stage startup. Heck, you can even look at it, existing and legacy companies now that may be competing against much larger foes. Is they use the fact that their brand is unknown as a crutch. Well, nobody really knows us. But the fact is that if you look at it that way, you're right, you're going to lose. And the important thing is to separate out a prospect experience and being able to, engage and understand them. And then separately, what brand differentiation, brand creation, brand development is. They are two very different things. And unfortunately, people put them together and then they start saying, well, nobody knows us. Big darn deal. It doesn't matter. Because if you connect with them personally, your brand doesn't matter until it matters.
So true. No, I agree with you. And I think that's what we have seen too. And again, like going back to that Instagram example, just to close the loop, I think one of the interesting things was like, if you really build that experience and you focus on your buyer, really closely and you build that experience for them, your brand is going to stand out. And we have seen this with Instagram automation. Being that thought leader within that particular event didn't really hurt our positioning strategy at all. Actually, in the future, when we were attending events, some of those people were actually attending that we never had a conversation, but we have done the outreach and marketing email. They would recognize us as a thought leader within that event. And that's brand. That's building that recognition. And so just really, really focus on your buyer as much as you can.
Okay, so I think it's also critical for you to talk about the shifting demographic associated with the buyer. So looking at a lot of the research, the buyers are changing the way that sellers need to engage and the way that sellers need to interact. And unfortunately, much like the political and education system, they are slow to change, slow to move. But the fact is where do these younger buyers, where do they seek and want information? It's not in the same places that the people before them, sought. And so therefore, if I'm not shifting that playbook, that I have in sales and marketing, I'm just going to be marketing to people that are not buying anymore. They're gone. So how is that shift, and how have you seen, you talked about Instagram, you talked about some of these things. What are some of the other significant shifts that people need to wake up? I mean, it ain't what it used to be.
New channels, yeah, I think a lot of times, in my case, in a B2B space, right, we follow where our buyers are and where their attention is. And so I usually follow the end user, and that is their consumer. And so where are their consumers? Right. This is interesting. Like Instagram, why wasn't it an important channel? Because we noticed from our own data and third-party research data that their consumers of those brands are now on Instagram. And we have been interviewing our customers and realizing that they're actually seeing that as a challenge because more and more of their consumers were asking questions on those channels and they were unable to support them. And so this is where I think it really just goes back to interesting and how you position the question, because it goes to understand your buyers and their buyers too. Follow their buyers there, if it's their consumer, if it's a patient, but really understand, go further, one step further, and understand their consumers' problems, their patients' problems. And I see this a lot with health tech. More and more organizations are focusing on digital patient experience, right? And So if you are a health tech organization and you are focusing on hospitals or small practices, the first thing you really want to understand is, where is the gap in the patient experience? Where are the patients today? What do patients want today? And that will gradually lead you to areas of, okay, this is what they want. And it will also help you understand and have a unique perspective in topics like Amazon acquiring One Medical. What does it mean? Well, now that you understand their consumers or their patients, you know what that means and you know why it's working for them. So if as a health tech or a technology provider, you can then position your solution in a framework of how you actually help organizations solve that problem and get closer to their consumers, that's the answer for you.
Well, to me, it kind of also gives that whole top of mind uh, a very different perspective, because it's, what would they be worrying about? Their customers.
Exactly.
Okay, so if I start thinking about, the transformation process, because that's really what we're talking about here. I used to do it this way, and I used to do all these things, and now I need to do something different. For some people, they just can't. They just are not going to be able to do that. I mean, it's too difficult of a process for a multitude of different reasons. But let's just say that those barriers were removed, right? Okay, I need to do things differently than I'm doing right now in order to experience the outcomes that I desire. Where do people start?
And that's a great question. So we can view this from marketing perspective. We can view this from business development. I think from a marketing perspective, you really start changing your overall strategy, just really making sure that it is aligned with what is top of mind for your buyer. So let me put it this way. So let me introduce you to the concept that we have, right? That's momentum marketing. It's a three-phase approach. And so the way we have found it most successfully implemented, and this transformation is significantly smooth, is when you really break it down into three phases. And so you think about it as starting a conversation around the topic, then gradually moving to the next phase where you then start introducing your solution. And then gradually from that phase, you move into education. So you really start educating people on the features, the benefits of your solution. So this is our go-to today. And on a quarterly basis, you can implement this type of strategy across a few momentums, 1, 2, or even 3 momentums. And so that goes back to your question, where do you start? Well, you start by identifying those high congregation moments. Before your quarter starts, you want to do your research and your due diligence, your interviews, and understand, where are my buyers headed this upcoming quarter? What is important for them? What is top of mind for them? What are their communication preferences? So you look at 2 things. 1, the topics and events that are important for them. 2, you really want to look into your own data and understand which communication channels they have been engaging most and preferring most, so that you are improving that, and going into a new quarter, you know which channels you should focus on, what type of frequency of emails or different channels you should be activating, and what content you should be creating. And from there, you then gradually start thinking about this 3-phase approach. Okay, this is what's top of mind. Can we invite our CEO if I'm an early stage startup? Or can we invite our customers to come and talk about this? Or how can we really challenge ourselves and our solution and our leadership team to think about this particular event that's top of mind for our buyers, and really think about how we structure our solution around it? How do we as a tech company can help solve this problem that's top of mind for our buyers? Once you identify the solution, that's when you start building your campaigns, right? That's when you start, if you have an upcoming webinar or event coming up, this is where okay, this is the angle, this is what we're going to talk about. But going back to your question, Jim, it really starts, understand what's top of mind for your buyer before the quarter starts, and understand what their communication preferences are.
Well, talk about top of mind, especially when we're sitting here, and at the time of this recording, we're at the end of February in 24. Massive movement that's happening in regards to the presidential political, campaigns and process and things like that. So how does a year like this year really put, let's just say, a curveball or a different perspective in momentum marketing?
That's a good question. It will depend on your audience. But I think one thing we're noticing in SaaS is that 2023 has been a challenging year. And going into 2024, there's a lot of uncertainty and challenging in a sense of growth. I think what has been a big challenge for SaaS is lending new businesses. I think a lot of companies were very good and lean in their operations in the past year and have been very successful in renewal. I think Jason Lemkin has spoken about this, and I'm quoting some of his words here, but it's been a tough year, and I think it's expected to be so. And it really goes back then, let's say, if you're a health tech company, how are hospitals doing today? And a lot of those hospitals depend on these events, right? And so I think, again, it depends who your buyer is and what industry they're in, but I think it really comes down to how these political events are impacting those industries is the question you want to ask yourself and be prepared for. And so, and in some cases, people already know. And if you're in retail, if you're in healthcare, if in different areas, or in education sector, you know what the upcoming challenges are. So you can kind of prepare yourself a little bit for those. It goes back to asking yourself, how will this political event, how will this any particular event that is coming up impact this industry, and what are the decision makers, the leaders in those industries preparing and doing for those things? So that would be my answer for you there, Jim. It really depends on industry and then how you really understand the industry and the challenges they're going through and how it's going to be impacting them.
Okay, so it goes back to the whole, research and getting close to your buyer piece. And again, looking at it from a different perspective of then it just consuming all of the airwaves. It's like, okay, well, how can I, proactively, be, be advantageous in regards to all of the activity that's going on. Okay, so you also had mentioned something about what we find a lot of success in regards to getting closer and building that trust and building those relationships. You mentioned something about community. Now, there, different companies that are in the business information space have put out, I guess you'd say thought leadership pieces associated with that new buyer, that new B2B buyer, and saying how community is becoming really a crucial element in their ability to make and drive decisions. Because when you start thinking about human nature, and it doesn't matter, we can go back to ancient times. How did humanity survive? Well, they survived by figuring out what other people were doing.
Yeah.
That's right. They looked to their peers. There were
Always.
tribal councils. There were, all of those things that happened, and that's what helped, humanity survive. And when you start looking at today's world being very complex, very ambiguous, very unpredictable, if we don't look to our peers, we're going to have a hard time surviving. So where has community fit within your overall strategy and thought process in regards to getting closer to that customer?
It's a great topic. And interesting thing was my observation over the past 2 years. I started attending more events myself on my own, going into SaaStr and different events in SaaS and try to connect with more marketing and sales leaders. And, one of the things I would always take with me is this idea of high congregation moments and see if it resonates or not. The beautiful thing about these interactions is that you put one idea and you take 10 or more back. And it's just magnificent. You then take and you go and test those ideas. It's great. One thing I found is that ever since COVID, people are more and more hungry to learn from each other. So your observation, absolutely true. And in the past 2 years, talking to BDR managers, talking to marketing managers, social media managers, they all have questions. They all have questions like, I have this landing page. How do I drive higher conversion? And I'm like, have you read this? And oh no, I never tried this strategy. I never tried this tactic. This is great. So and I can see now, with platforms like Pavilion, with many other platforms and communities going out there, like I can see this growth, and this applies to us too. We have grown our community over the past year very naturally by just starting conversations, connecting with each other. So I think this is in itself another momentum, another wave. And I think with AI, with so many new things evolving, community is going to be something big in SaaS, and I'm sure even beyond SaaS. But just being in this world, in a SaaS world, I can say that in the next few years, communities are going to play a huge role in how companies evolve and adapt to these changes, to the strategies, because those discussions yield so many new ideas, so many new outcomes, and people try that, and then and I think this Google and Yahoo topic that we started talking about is just one of many examples. And AI, and how do you adapt AI in your organization effectively, avoiding the noise. All those topics. We hear that all the time in our community, within the momentum marketing framework, outside of momentum marketing framework. I see this in other communities I'm part of. I think that is what's going to help people be stronger and adapt to all these changes that are happening. And yeah, together, absolutely, we need to learn from each other. And that is what's going to help companies succeed.
I mean, we see that happening too. I mean, so at peerroundtables.com, we have a couple different communities, and one of the communities is in the is with senior security leaders. And you were talking about generative AI and the impacts in regards to cybersecurity and the impacts that it has on businesses. It's a huge issue right now. It is top of mind. And then also when you started talking about even the insurance elements associated with artificial intelligence, it's like that whole unknown, quite frankly, is it's working with our peers to figure out, hey, how are you approaching this? It's going to help people have the confidence to actually move forward instead of just standing still. So I mean, you're dead on. Okay, so if I sat here and I was looking at all the different opportunities that exist to me today, and you're talking about these different constituents that are involved with overall growth, where oftentimes do you see the biggest gain being able to be experienced? So, I mean, you're looking at the entire landscape, right? I want to focus here first. And then we talked about, yes, getting to your buyer. Yes, we talked about that, but see if you can just say, okay, I'm leaving you with this one thing. Jump on this. What would it be?
I know I said a lot about focus on your buyer. I think be ready for more changes. More changes are coming from AI, and more changes are coming from Google and all those different platforms. We are getting closer to a place where communication gap is big in SaaS, and we're going to feel more of that pain across different platforms, enabling more regulations, more changes coming, and to be able to survive that, to be able to have an edge as an organization, as a marketing leader, to help your organization to have an edge with all these changes. Have your finger on a pulse when it comes to your buyer. Just focus on them with massive obsession, with the buyer centricity, whether it's identifying moments, whatever your approach is, but just stay focused on your buyer and align everything you do, marketing and sales, around your buyer. And if you support that journey, regardless of all these regulations and changes, you're always going to be one step ahead.
That's a great point. I mean, change was yesterday, change is today, change will be tomorrow.
Always. Yep.
Avetis, thank you for sharing your knowledge and wisdom. How does the B2B DM gang get in touch with you?
Yeah, you can connect with me over email, avetis@growthhunter.com, on LinkedIn, and definitely check out growthhunter.com for content. We have a community. You can connect with me there as well.
Avetis, thank you for sharing your knowledge and wisdom, and we wish you the very best.
Thank you, Jim. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us. Go now to join the B2B DM gang in the B2B Marketer LinkedIn group, where you can connect with other B2B DM disruptors and get access to our B2B DM cheat sheets, checklist, and guides. While you're at it, if you found value in this show, please help by going to iTunes to rate, review, and subscribe. And share the show on all of your digital platforms. Be sure to tune in next week for our next episode. And always remember, you can automate your lead capture, but you must lure your lead.